Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this moment will be remembered long after the dust settles on the diplomatic games being played in Washington's corridors of power. This is not just another political response. This is the sound of a continent awakening. They want to call me a threat. Judge Thomas and his carefully orchestrated machinery of sanctions and condemnation have branded me dangerous to their established order. But here's what they don't understand, and what you're about to discover, is that some threats are exactly what the world needs. That I speak to you now, with fire coursing through my veins and the voices of my ancestors thundering in my ears. Not the sanitized version of African leadership that gets paraded through international summits, but the raw, unfiltered truth of what it means to stand for your people when the entire global system is designed to keep you kneeling. You see, Judge Thomas, you have done something remarkable. You have labeled me a threat, and in doing so, you have given me the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to show the world exactly what kind of threat I truly am. This label doesn't land only on my shoulders. It crashes down upon every daughter and son of Africa who has ever dared to stretch their hands toward dignity. Every young person in Detroit who refuses to accept systemic inequality. Every grandmother in Ghana who remembers when her village was truly free. But here's where your calculation went wrong. You expected me to cower. You expected me to issue careful diplomatic statements, to hire expensive lawyers in Washington, to play the game by your rules. Instead, I'm going to do something that terrifies you far more than any weapon could. I'm going to tell the truth. The name Ibrahim Traoré doesn't just echo in the markets of Ouagadougou or in the farming communities of Bobo Dioulasso. It reverberates in the housing projects of Baltimore, in the churches of Atlanta, in the universities, where young African Americans are finally learning their true history. You thought you were sanctioning one man. What you've actually done is awakened a sleeping giant that spans continents. Let me paint you a picture of what real threat looks like. It's not found in the barrel of a gun or in the rhetoric of violence. Real threat is a young African leader who refuses to sell his people's future for a seat at your table. Real threat is someone who looks at the so-called international community and says, "We don't need your permission to be free." You want to know why I'm dangerous? I'll tell you exactly why. And by the time I'm finished, you'll understand why your sanctions feel less like punishment and more like a badge of honor. I am dangerous because I tell the truth without apology. While your diplomatic circles speak in coded language about partnerships and development aid, I speak plainly about extraction and exploitation. While you dress up neo-colonialism in the fancy clothes of international cooperation, I strip it naked and show it for what it is. The same old theft with better public relations. Here's what keeps you awake at night, Judge Thomas. I am dangerous because I refuse to play the role you've written for African leaders. I don't smile for your cameras while my people suffer. I don't sign your contracts while our resources disappear into your bank accounts. I don't attend your summits to nod respectfully while you decide Africa's fate without us. But there's something even more threatening to your world order. I am dangerous because I speak directly to my brothers and sisters across the Atlantic Ocean, and they recognize the same chains, just dressed in different clothing. When I talk about economic exploitation in Burkina Faso, they hear echoes of redlining in Chicago. When I describe political manipulation in West Africa, they see the same playbook used in their own communities. You see, you made a critical error in your strategy. You thought Africa and African America were separate problems you could handle individually. You never imagined that a voice from Burkina Faso could reach into the heart of Harlem and find the same fire burning there. Let me tell you about the real threat I represent. Every time a young African American watches me refuse to bow to Western pressure, they see possibility. Every time I choose African dignity over international approval, they remember their own power. Every time I speak about sovereignty, they hear freedom in their own language. That I am a threat to the comfortable lie that Africa needs to be saved by those who spent centuries destroying it. I am a threat to the narrative that says we should be grateful for crumbs from tables built with our own wood, carved by our own hands, laden with food grown in our own soil. But here's where it gets interesting. The more you try to isolate me, the more you reveal the weakness of your position. Every sanction you impose is an admission that one man speaking truth from a small West African nation has the power to shake the foundations of your global order. If I were truly irrelevant, you would ignore me. If my words were truly meaningless, You wouldn't need to silence them. Your reaction tells the story better than any speech I could give. You are afraid, not of Ibrahim Traoré the individual, but of what I represent. You are terrified of an Africa that says no. You are horrified by the prospect of African leaders who serve their people instead of your interests. Now, let me speak directly to my family in the African diaspora, because this message is as much for you as it is a response to those who seek to break every African American who has ever been told that your anger is too loud, your demands too radical, your dreams too big. I want you to hear something clearly. That fire in your chest, that burning sense of injustice, that refusal to accept less than you deserve, that is not separate from what we feel here in Burkina Faso. That is the same fire. That is the same spirit that runs through the red earth of our homeland. When you march in the streets of Ferguson, when you demand justice in Minneapolis, when you fight for your children's right to quality education in Oakland, you are continuing a conversation that began in these very villages centuries ago. You are speaking words that were first whispered in the darkness of slave ships, that were sung in cotton fields, that were shouted from the podiums of civil rights leaders who knew that freedom anywhere meant freedom everywhere. Here's what they never wanted you to realize. Your liberation and ours are not separate struggles. They are the same struggle, playing out in different theaters. When you fight systemic racism in America, you are fighting the same system that keeps Africa in economic bondage. When you demand reparations for historical injustices, you are demanding the same accountability we seek for centuries of resource extraction. The beauty of this moment, and what terrifies those who seek to control us, is that we are finally having this conversation openly. For too long, they kept us focused on our differences, on the ocean between us, on the different languages we speak. But underneath it all, we share the same blood, the same history, the same unbreakable spirit. You want to know why they're so desperate to stop me? Because I'm not just speaking to Burkina Faso. I'm speaking to every person of African descent who has ever felt the weight of a system designed to keep them down. I'm speaking to the grandmother in Alabama who remembers when voting required courage, and to the student in Senegal who dreams of building technology that serves her community instead of foreign corporations. This is bigger than one country, bigger than one leader, bigger than one moment in history. This is about the realization that we have never needed their permission to be great. We have never needed their approval to be free. We have never needed their validation to know our worth. Let me tell you what real independence looks like, because it's not what they taught you in their schools or what they show you in their movies. Real independence is when a nation chooses its own partners based on mutual respect, not historical domination. It's when we develop our own resources for our own people's benefit, not for the profit margins of distant shareholders. It's when we educate our children in schools that teach them they are the descendants of kings and queens, not just the victims of slavery. Real independence is when we build our own technological capabilities, our own financial systems, our own trade relationships. It's when we stop asking for aid and start demanding fair trade. It's when we stop accepting investment that enriches others while impoverishing us, and start creating wealth that stays in our communities. But here's the most dangerous part of our independence. It's working. Despite every obstacle, every sanction, every attempt to undermine us, we are building something beautiful. Our youth are not fleeing to Europe in desperate boats. They are staying home to build the future they want to see. Our farmers are not just surviving. They are thriving with techniques that honor both tradition and innovation. Our women are not just participating in the economy. They are leading it, creating cooperatives that span regions, developing solutions that address real problems in real communities. Our soldiers are not fighting proxy wars for foreign powers. They are protecting the sovereignty that allows all of this growth to happen. And this is what truly terrifies the international order. We are proving that another way is possible. We are demonstrating that Africa doesn't need to choose between development and dignity, between progress and self-determination. Now, I want to address something that cuts to the heart of why this moment matters so much. For generations, African leaders have been told that to be taken seriously on the world stage, they must moderate their positions, soften their rhetoric, make compromises that inevitably favor those who are already powerful. We have been told that to be considered legitimate, we must speak their language, adopt their economic models, accept their definitions of democracy and human rights. We have been conditioned to believe that our own ways of organizing society, our own concepts of justice, our own approaches to community and governance are somehow inferior, primitive, or unworthy of respect. But what if that entire framework is a lie designed to keep us dependent? What if the very standards by which they judge our legitimacy are tools of control? What if real leadership means refusing to play by rules that were never designed for our benefit? This is the conversation that makes them uncomfortable. This is the question that cannot be answered within the comfortable boundaries of their diplomatic protocols. Because once we start asking these questions, once we start imagining alternatives, once we start building those alternatives, their entire system of control begins to crumble. You see, they need us to believe that we need them. Their power depends on our acceptance of their indispensability. But what happens when we stop accepting that premise? What happens when we start building our own systems, creating our own partnerships, defining our own success? That's the real threat I represent. Not violence, not chaos, not instability, but the possibility that Africa might actually succeed on its own terms. The possibility that we might create models of governance and development that make their approaches look outdated and self-serving. My brothers and sisters in the diaspora, I want you to understand something crucial about this moment. When you see me standing firm against international pressure, when you watch me choose African interests over Western approval, you are seeing a preview of what's possible for all of us. Your struggles in America, your fights for justice and equality, your demands for systemic change, these are not separate from our work here in Africa. They are part of the same project of liberation, the same insistence on dignity, the same refusal to accept that things must remain as they are. When you organize in your communities, when you vote for leaders who truly represent your interests, when you support businesses that invest in your neighborhoods, when you educate your children about their full history, you are doing the same work we are doing here. You are building power from within your communities instead of waiting for it to be granted from above. And here's what they really fear: the possibility that we might coordinate these efforts. The possibility that the economic power of the African diaspora might align with the natural resources and growing markets of the continent. The possibility that cultural and intellectual exchange might flow in both directions, enriching all of our communities. Imagine African American entrepreneurs partnering with African innovators to create technologies that serve our communities first. Imagine diaspora investment flowing back to the continent not as charity, but as partnership between equals. Imagine educational exchanges that strengthen both sides of the Atlantic. This is the future they are trying to prevent with their sanctions and their threats. This is the collaboration that keeps them awake at night, because it represents a fundamental shift in global power dynamics. But let me tell you something that should fill you with hope instead of fear. This future is not just a dream, it's already happening. Despite every obstacle they place in our path, despite every attempt to divide us, despite every effort to convince us that we are too different, too distant, too damaged to work together effectively, young people are already building these bridges. Technology is already enabling these connections. Trade relationships are already developing outside of traditional Western channels. Cultural exchanges are already happening at a grassroots level that bypasses official diplomatic channels entirely. The Africa that I represent is not the Africa of international aid campaigns or poverty tourism. It is not the Africa of civil wars and famine that dominates Western media coverage. It is the Africa of innovation and entrepreneurship, of rich cultural traditions adapting to modern challenges, of young leaders who refuse to accept limitations imposed by others. This is the Africa that is rising despite sanctions, growing despite isolation, thriving despite every attempt to keep us dependent. And this is the Africa that extends its hand to its children across the ocean, not as a savior or as a victim, but as family reconnecting after a long separation. When they call me a threat, when they try to paint this movement as dangerous or destabilizing, remember what you've witnessed here. Remember that sometimes the greatest threat to an unjust system is simply the possibility of a just alternative. Remember that real change has never come from those who benefit from the status quo. It has always come from those who were willing to be called threats, who were willing to be misunderstood, who were willing to stand alone until others found the courage to stand with them. We are not standing alone anymore. From the villages of Burkina Faso to the cities of America, from the farms of Mali to the universities of Ghana, from the markets of Nigeria to the communities of the Caribbean, we are standing together. This is our moment. This is our time. This is our opportunity to write the next chapter of our story, not as victims of history, but as architects of the future. The fire that burns in my veins is the same fire that burns in yours. The ancestors who guide my steps are the same ancestors who whisper strength into your struggles. The future we are building here is the same future that calls to you there. That we are one people, scattered across the globe, but united in purpose. We are one voice, speaking in many languages but saying the same thing. That our time has come, that our moment is now, that our future will be written by our own hands. Call me a threat if you must. Call us all threats. Because we are threatening to change everything. And we are just getting started. The storm you tried to ignore has arrived. The reckoning you tried to postpone is here. The future you tried to control is slipping through your fingers like sand. And we, the children of Africa, are writing our names not in pencil, but carving them deep into the stone of history. Watch us rise. Watch us build. Watch us prove that another world is not only possible, it's inevitable. This is just the beginning. And they cannot stop what has already begun.